Good evening and welcome. Tonight, let us step gently into a world that feels both familiar and strangely unreal, a version of Christmas shaped not by scarcity or anticipation, but by comfort so deep it barely notices itself. Close your eyes for a moment and imagine America in the mid-1950s, a time often remembered as warm, optimistic, and endlessly confident in the future. Now imagine that era through the lens of those who had everything already. This is not a story about hardship, miracles, or last-minute surprises. This is a quiet journey into how the wealthiest families in post-war America experienced Christmas, wrapped in tradition, polished by routine, and softened by privilege. The 1950s were a decade defined by abundance, at least on the surface. The war was over, factories were humming, suburbs were expanding, and the American dream was being packaged and sold in glossy magazine spreads. For many families, Christmas meant hope, saving up, decorating modest trees, and stretching budgets to create something special. But for the very wealthy, Christmas did not arrive as a break from reality. It arrived as a continuation of it. The holiday simply slipped into place, perfectly aligned with a life already built on certainty and excess. This story looks at that world with gentle humor and quiet observation. It does not judge harshly, nor does it glorify. Instead, it notices how rituals become performances when comfort is guaranteed, how luxury becomes invisible when it is constant, and how even celebration can become routine when nothing is truly at risk. For the ultra-wealthy families of 1950s America, Christmas was less about wonder and more about refinement. The excitement was not in whether gifts would appear, but in how they would be presented. Not in who would help in the kitchen, but in how smoothly the household would run. There was an unspoken assumption underlying everything: things would be taken care of. Always. This kind of Christmas did not begin with frantic shopping trips or late-night wrapping sessions. It began long before December. Preparations were layered, delegated, and perfected. Decorations appeared as if by magic. Meals unfolded without stress. Wrapping paper was flawless, ribbons perfectly tied. The work existed, of course, but it happened quietly, out of sight, carried by others whose names rarely entered the family stories. What makes this version of Christmas so fascinating is not just the scale of wealth, but how completely it reshaped the meaning of the holiday. In homes where abundance was the norm, Christmas lost its sense of contrast. There was no sharp difference between ordinary days and special ones. Instead, the holiday became a heightened version of everyday luxury, a little more sparkle, a few more rituals, but fundamentally familiar. Even joy followed rules. Gifts were opened slowly with grace. Gratitude was expected but never too loud. Excitement was measured. Surprise was carefully managed. In this world, chaos was something that happened elsewhere, in other houses, in other neighborhoods. Christmas was meant to be smooth. There is a subtle satire woven through this story because excess has a way of becoming quietly absurd. When stockings are already full before being filled, when trees are taller than ceilings, when traditions exist mostly to signal taste and status, the holiday begins to feel like theater. Everyone knows their role. Everyone knows their cues. And everyone understands that this performance has been passed down through generations. The wealthy Christmas of the 1950s was deeply tied to image. Appearances mattered not just to neighbors, but to memory itself. Family photos were staged. Cards were curated. Decorations were chosen not only for beauty, but for what they communicated. Taste was a language, and Christmas was one of its most eloquent sentences. Yet beneath all of this polish lies something quietly human. Because even in the most comfortable homes, people still gathered. They still laughed, competed, reminisced, and occasionally grew tired of one another. The rituals may have been extravagant, but the emotions underneath were familiar. Pride, nostalgia, rivalry, affection. This story does not present the wealthy as villains or heroes. Instead, it presents them as people shaped by a particular environment, one where security was inherited, where ease was expected, and where Christmas arrived not as a question but as a certainty. That certainty changed everything. In many ways, the satire comes from contrast. We are used to thinking of Christmas as a time when something feels different, when routines pause and life softens. But for those who lived inside constant comfort, Christmas did not interrupt life. It simply confirmed it. The house was already warm. The table was already full. The future already felt stable. And so the holiday leaned into what it could offer: ritual, repetition, and reassurance. Christmas became a mirror reflecting back a life of order and control. Even indulgence followed structure. Even celebration had a schedule. There is something oddly soothing about this predictability, and something faintly hollow as well. When nothing is uncertain, surprise loses its power. When abundance is constant, generosity becomes symbolic rather than urgent. When comfort is guaranteed, gratitude becomes polite instead of profound. And yet, the story never forgets that memory is powerful. For the children growing up in these houses, these Christmases became legends. The smells, the lights, the sounds all etched deeply into their sense of what the world should feel like. For them, this was not excess. It was normal. As time passes, these memories gain a golden glow. The details soften. The absurdities become charming. The rituals become sacred. Looking back, it all feels safe. And safety, perhaps more than anything else, is what defined Christmas at the very top of 1950s America. This opening chapter invites us not to envy or criticize, but to observe. To notice how wealth shapes tradition. How comfort alters meaning. And how even the most extravagant celebrations are, at their core, attempts to create warmth, continuity, and belonging. Tonight's story is not about how Christmas should be celebrated. It is about how it was experienced by those for whom nothing was missing. And in that fullness, we may find something quietly revealing, not just about wealth, but about the human desire to ritualize happiness, to preserve moments, and to make the familiar feel eternal. So as we continue, let yourself drift into this world gently. Listen not just to the excess but to the rhythm beneath it. Because even wrapped in silk and certainty, Christmas still whispers the same question it always has: how do we hold on to comfort, and what does it mean when we never have to let go? And with that thought, we step fully into the house, the decade, and the long, glowing holiday night ahead. As we continue this quiet journey into the Christmas world of America's wealthiest families in the 1950s, we now arrive at the moment that defines everything else: Christmas morning itself. Not the frantic, joyful scramble many people remember, but something far more controlled, deliberate, and polished. This was a morning designed not to surprise, but to reassure. A morning where nothing was left to chance. In these homes, Christmas morning did not burst into existence with alarm clocks, tangled lights, or last-minute panic. It unfolded slowly, almost ceremonially, like a well-rehearsed performance that had been perfected over decades. The house was already awake long before the family stirred. Heat hummed through the floors. Curtains were drawn back at precisely the right moment. Coffee was brewed to exact preferences. The day did not begin when the family opened their eyes. It began when the household decided it was ready. Waking up in a wealthy 1950s household was an experience defined by silence and softness. There were no sharp sounds, no rush, no sense that time was slipping away. Christmas morning did not demand attention. It waited patiently. Bedrooms were large, insulated, and calm, filled with layers of imported linens and thick drapes that kept the outside world at a respectful distance. Even the winter cold felt curated, visible only through frosted windows rather than felt in the air. The first moments of the day were not about action but about ease. There was time to linger. Time to remain still. Time to decide whether to rise immediately or enjoy a few more minutes of warmth. This luxury of choice, of unhurried existence, was one of the most powerful markers of wealth. Christmas morning was not something you chased. It came to you. In these homes, even the act of waking up was supported by others. A knock at the door might come, gentle and precise, not to interrupt but to inform. Breakfast would be ready when the family wished. Clothing had been laid out. Slippers were waiting. Everything anticipated need before it was spoken. The idea of doing something yourself before breakfast was almost quaint. What stands out most about this morning is how thoroughly it removed uncertainty. There was no wondering if something had been forgotten. No anxiety about timing. No concern about whether things would go according to plan. Christmas morning was designed to feel inevitable, smooth, perfectly managed. In a world where wealth insulated families from disruption, the holiday became a confirmation that life was functioning exactly as intended. The atmosphere carried a specific tone, quiet confidence. There was no need to rush toward the living room or race siblings down the hall. The tree would be there. The gifts would be waiting. Nothing was going anywhere. In fact, anticipation itself was slowed, stretched gently across the morning like soft music playing in another room. Smell played an important role in setting the scene. Pine from the tree. Coffee freshly prepared. A hint of fireplace smoke carefully controlled. These were not accidental sensations. They were part of the design. Christmas morning was meant to feel timeless, detached from the outside world, almost floating. For children growing up in this environment, Christmas morning carried a very different emotional shape. Excitement existed, but it was tempered by expectation. There was no fear of disappointment. The question was not if something special would happen, but how impressive it would be. Wonder was present, but it was domesticated, trained to behave. Parents moved through the morning with practiced calm. There was no need to coordinate or improvise. Their role was not logistical, but supervisory. They ensured the rhythm of the morning stayed intact. That no one rushed. That no one disrupted the flow. That gratitude was expressed properly, excitement remained tasteful, and everything unfolded in the correct order. This sense of order extended to the household staff, whose work made this serenity possible. Their presence was subtle, almost invisible, yet essential. They moved quietly, efficiently, ensuring nothing intruded on the illusion of effortlessness. In many ways, Christmas morning was a collective achievement, though only a few ever received recognition for it. What makes this orchestration so fascinating is how it reshaped the meaning of Christmas itself. In many homes, Christmas morning is chaotic, emotional, unpredictable. In these houses, it was controlled, predictable. The chaos had been removed long ago, filtered out by resources, planning, and hierarchy. The holiday became less about surprise and more about continuity. Even joy followed a schedule. Breakfast would come before presents. Family members would gather at the appointed time. Everyone knew where to stand, where to sit, how to behave. There was comfort in this structure. The world felt stable, safe, unchanging. Christmas morning was not a disruption to daily life. It was a reinforcement of it. And yet, beneath this calm surface, there was also subtle pressure. When everything is perfectly arranged, there is little room for spontaneity. Children learned early that excitement should be expressed politely. That gratitude should sound sincere but not excessive. That Christmas was something you participated in correctly. This careful choreography taught lessons that extended far beyond the holiday. It reinforced the idea that life should be smooth, controlled, and dignified. That problems were solved quietly. That visible struggle was unnecessary, even improper. Christmas morning was not just a celebration. It was training. The absence of stress created a particular kind of memory. Looking back, these mornings often feel dreamlike. Soft, bright, calm. But they can also feel distant, slightly unreal. When nothing goes wrong, nothing stands out sharply. The memory becomes an impression rather than a moment. So, there is something undeniably soothing about this vision. A morning without urgency. A day that begins gently. A sense that the world is held together by routines that never fail. For many, this was the ideal Christmas, not because it was exciting, but because it was safe. As we move deeper into this story, it becomes clear that Christmas morning in these households was not about creating joy from scarcity. It was about preserving comfort in abundance, about ensuring that nothing disrupted the delicate balance of ease and expectation that defined life at the top. And so, the day begins not with a burst of laughter or tearing paper, but with a quiet certainty. Christmas has arrived. Everything is ready. Nothing is missing. And in this perfectly prepared morning, the rest of the holiday waits patiently to unfold. In the next chapter, we will see how even the simplest details, what you wear, how you move through the house, how you are seen, become part of this larger performance of wealth, tradition, and control. As Christmas morning settles into its gentle rhythm, we begin to notice something subtle but deeply revealing. In these houses, luxury is not reserved for special occasions. It is not brought out for guests, nor saved for moments of celebration. Luxury is simply how life works. And on Christmas morning in 1950s wealthy America, this everyday luxury transforms into a kind of ceremony, quiet, repetitive, and strangely competitive. Here, even the act of getting dressed becomes meaningful. Clothing is no longer just about warmth or comfort. It becomes a signal, a language, a reminder of who you are, where you belong, and what is expected of you. On Christmas morning, this language is spoken softly, through silk, cashmere, and carefully chosen details that most people would never notice, but everyone in the house understands. Pajamas, in particular, take on an almost symbolic role. In most homes, pajamas are practical. Something worn briefly, rarely seen, and quickly forgotten. But in these households, pajamas are curated, chosen, gifted. They are part of the holiday performance, as important as the tree or the presents beneath it. They are not meant to be hidden. They are meant to be seen. Children and adults alike emerge from their rooms wrapped in fabrics that feel indulgent to the touch. Silk glides against skin. Cotton is impossibly soft. Robes are heavy, thick, and reassuring. Slippers are lined and monogrammed. Everything feels intentional. Nothing feels accidental. This ritual serves several purposes at once. On the surface, it is about comfort. Who would not want to begin Christmas morning wrapped in warmth and softness? But beneath that, it is about continuity. Wearing these garments connects each family member to generations before them. Pajamas are handed down, styles repeated, traditions preserved. The morning uniform quietly reinforces the idea that this family has always lived this way. There is also, undeniably, an element of comparison. Without ever being spoken aloud, everyone notices details. The quality of fabric, the stitching, the embroidery, whose initials appear in gold thread instead of white, whose robe seems newer, heavier, more extravagant. This is not competition in the loud sense. It is refined, polite, almost invisible. But it exists. Children learn this language early. They learn how to appreciate luxury without appearing impressed by it. They learn how to accept expensive gifts with calm gratitude. They learn that excitement should be controlled, and that admiration should never sound like surprise. In this world, to act amazed by comfort would be to admit you are not used to it. As family members pass one another in the hallways, there is a quiet exchange of glances, a nod of approval, a subtle assessment. The ritual is familiar enough that no one needs to explain it. Christmas morning attire is part of the unspoken code. You are dressed appropriately for the life you inhabit. What makes this particularly interesting is how ordinary it feels to those living inside it. There is no sense of extravagance, from their perspective. This is simply how mornings are meant to feel: soft, warm, orderly. Anything less would feel strange. In this way, luxury becomes invisible. It stops being special and starts being expected. This daily ceremony extends beyond clothing. How you move through the house matters. How you sit. How you hold your cup of coffee. How long you linger before breakfast. The entire morning is paced slowly, deliberately. Rushing would break the spell. Hurry belongs to other lives, other houses, other neighborhoods. In these homes, time itself feels different. Christmas morning is not governed by urgency or schedules imposed from the outside world. There is no work to prepare for, no errands to run, no pressure to maximize the day. Time stretches. It bends around comfort. This, too, is a luxury, one that is rarely acknowledged, but deeply felt. The daily ceremony of luxury creates a sense of insulation. The outside world feels distant. News, weather, and obligations fade into the background. Christmas morning exists almost entirely inside the house, within its walls, traditions, and routines. The world beyond is something to be observed later, perhaps from the window, but not engaged with yet. This insulation has consequences. When life is always soft, difficulty feels abstract. Problems are things that happen elsewhere. Christmas, in this context, is not a reminder of generosity or resilience. It is a confirmation that everything is working as it should, that the system holds. And yet, there is also comfort here. Real comfort. There is safety in routine. There is reassurance in knowing exactly how the day will unfold. The ceremony of luxury removes decision-making, uncertainty, and friction. It allows the family to exist within a carefully maintained bubble of ease. For the children, this ceremony becomes formative. It teaches them what normal feels like, what they should expect from life, what they should one day provide for themselves and their own families. Christmas morning is not just a memory. It is a blueprint. As they grow older, many of these children will recreate these rituals instinctively. The same fabrics, the same pacing, the same controlled expressions of joy. What feels like tradition is often repetition passed down not because it was chosen, but because it was absorbed. From the outside, this world can seem excessive, even absurd. So much attention placed on clothing meant for sleeping. So much significance given to things that most people barely think about. But from the inside it feels coherent, logical, even necessary. Luxury, when practiced daily, becomes a form of structure. It tells people how to behave, how to feel, and how to measure success. Christmas morning simply amplifies this structure, making it visible through texture, timing, and tone. As the family gathers, robes brushing softly against one another, slippers moving silently across polished floors, the ceremony is complete. Everyone is dressed not just for the day, but for the identity they carry. Wealth is not announced. It is worn. And in this quiet, carefully choreographed moment, Christmas continues not as a surprise, not as an escape, but as a seamless extension of a life already wrapped in comfort. In the next chapter, we will see how this sense of control extends beyond clothing and time, into something even more revealing, the way technology itself becomes a symbol of authority, convenience, and subtle power within the wealthy household. As the house fully awakens and the rituals of comfort settle into place, another feature of the wealthy 1950s Christmas morning quietly reveals itself. It is not flashy and it does not sparkle like ornaments or silk robes. Yet it may be one of the most telling symbols of privilege in the entire household. This is the role of technology not as a convenience, but as a subtle form of power, control, and even amusement. In the postwar imagination, technology represented progress, confidence, and the future. America believed deeply in machines, systems, and innovation. For wealthy families, this belief was not abstract. It was built directly into their homes. And on Christmas morning, technology was not something that disrupted the holiday. It was something that elevated it. One device in particular captured this perfectly: the household intercom. In a large 1950s mansion, distance mattered. Bedrooms were separated by wings. Kitchens existed far from living rooms. Staff areas were discreetly removed from family spaces. Calling out across the house was not practical, and walking to deliver messages was unnecessary. The intercom solved all of this. Mounted neatly on walls throughout the house, it created a network of instant communication that felt almost magical at the time. But the intercom was more than a tool. It was a signal. To speak through the walls of your own house and be heard everywhere at once was a reminder of scale. It reinforced the idea that this home was not just large, but important enough to require its own internal communication system. On Christmas morning, when family members used the intercom to summon others, announce the start of the day, or call everyone to breakfast, the act itself became ceremonial. Pressing that button carried a sense of authority. Your voice filled hallways, kitchens, and distant rooms. You did not need to raise your tone or repeat yourself. The house listened. And more importantly, so did the people inside it. For children, this was intoxicating. Christmas morning gave them a rare opportunity to step into this power. Paging siblings. Calling grandparents. Accidentally reaching the gardener instead of the guest room. Each announcement carried a thrill not of rebellion, but of control. It felt like being temporarily in charge of something vast and responsive. A house that moved when you spoke. This use of technology turned communication into performance. Announcements were delivered with exaggerated formality or playful mischief. A simple good morning became theatrical. The intercom transformed the ordinary act of calling someone into a moment of spectacle. What makes this especially revealing is how normal it felt to those living inside the house. There was no sense of novelty. The intercom was simply there, part of the environment like the fireplace or the staircase. Yet its presence quietly reinforced hierarchy. Not everyone used it in the same way. Family members spoke freely. Staff responded. The system mirrored the structure of the household itself. Technology in this context did not flatten social distance. It clarified it. This pattern extended beyond the intercom. Radios played softly in the background, tuned to holiday music or news. Clocks chimed with dignified authority. Lighting systems created perfect ambience without effort. Everything functioned smoothly, predictably, without visible struggle. Technology removed friction from daily life, allowing the illusion of effortlessness to remain intact. On Christmas morning, this mattered deeply. The absence of interruption was part of the experience. No missed calls. No confusion. No raised voices. Communication flowed cleanly, quietly, exactly as intended. The house operated like a well-run institution. There is a quiet humor in this too. Because for all its sophistication, the intercom also invited small moments of chaos. Buttons were pressed incorrectly. Voices echoed unexpectedly. Someone always forgot to turn it off. These moments became part of the holiday rhythm, tiny disruptions that felt harmless precisely because everything else was so controlled. In these moments, technology became play. Children experimented with voices. Adults tolerated it with amused restraint. Staff adapted seamlessly. The system absorbed all of it without breaking. This reinforced an important lesson: the structure was strong. Nothing small could disrupt it. That lesson extended far beyond Christmas. Growing up in an environment where technology anticipated your needs and responded instantly shaped expectations. It taught children that systems should work, that delays were unnecessary, that communication should be efficient and one-directional when required. These assumptions followed them into adulthood. Christmas morning simply made them visible. What stands out is how technology replaced the need for negotiation. You did not need to ask loudly. You did not need to search for someone. You did not need to compromise. You spoke and the house responded. This ease of command, exercised casually and without consequence, shaped how authority felt: natural, calm, unquestioned. In many homes, Christmas morning is loud. Voices overlap. People call out names. There is a joyful chaos to it. In these houses, technology smoothed that chaos into something quieter and more controlled. The holiday became less about noise and more about coordination. This coordination created a sense of calm that felt deeply reassuring. Nothing was out of reach. No one was ever truly lost in the house. The intercom connected everyone into a single system, reinforcing the idea that the family, like the home, was unified and well organized. At the same time, it subtly reinforced dependence. The house worked because the systems worked. The systems worked because someone maintained them. And those someone else's remained largely invisible. Technology allowed the family to feel self-sufficient while relying heavily on infrastructure and labor they rarely acknowledged. Christmas morning unfolded smoothly not because it was effortless, but because effort had been hidden. There is something very mid-century about this belief in systems. The 1950s trusted structure, trusted planning, trusted that the right tools could eliminate uncertainty. In wealthy homes, this trust was rewarded daily. And on Christmas morning it was celebrated. The intercom, the radio, the lighting, the heating all worked together to create a sense of control over environment and time. The outside world could wait. Inside, everything was already arranged. As family members gathered, summoned not by shouting but by gentle announcements, Christmas morning advanced to its next stage. Breakfast awaited. The day moved forward without friction. And once again, the house proved that it could deliver exactly what was expected of it. In the next chapter, we will see how this same desire for order and display transforms something even more familiar, the Christmas meal. Because in these homes, food is never just nourishment. It is ritual, performance, and quiet competition served on silver trays. As Christmas morning continues its slow, deliberate unfolding, we arrive at a moment that might seem ordinary at first glance, but in these households carries enormous symbolic weight: breakfast. In most homes, breakfast on Christmas morning is hurried, informal, and often postponed in favor of gifts. But for the wealthy families of 1950s America, breakfast is not something to rush through. It is the first major event of the day, and it is treated with care, structure, and quiet ceremony. This is not a meal meant to satisfy hunger. It is a performance. Before anyone sits down, the room itself has already been prepared. Light enters through large windows at just the right angle, reflecting off polished silver and pristine china. The table is set long before the family arrives, each place carefully arranged. Napkins are folded precisely. Cups and saucers are aligned. Everything suggests that this moment matters. Not because people are starving, but because tradition demands attention. The breakfast room, often called something more elegant than a simple dining room, feels removed from the rest of the house. It is calm, bright, and orderly. The chaos of the outside world, and even the excitement of Christmas itself, feels distant here. This space exists to reinforce a sense of control. You sit down not just to eat, but to participate. Food arrives in waves rather than all at once. Trays appear quietly. Plates are placed smoothly. There is no scrambling, no reaching across the table, no sense of urgency. Everything moves at a measured pace. Breakfast unfolds as if it has been rehearsed. What is served reflects the values of the household. Abundance is essential, but so is restraint. The table is full, yet nothing feels excessive in presentation. Eggs prepared perfectly. Toast crisp and evenly browned. Pastries arranged as if for display rather than consumption. Even fruit is treated with care, sliced and positioned to look effortless and refined. In these homes, breakfast communicates status as clearly as any gift. Imported ingredients, specialized dishes, foods that require time, skill, and planning. Nothing about the meal suggests improvisation. This is not comfort food. It is confidence on a plate. Conversation at the table follows similar rules. Voices are calm. Topics are light. There is laughter, but it is contained. No one dominates the room. No one interrupts. Even excitement is filtered through good manners. Children are expected to participate properly, to sit still, to speak politely, to wait their turn. This breakfast teaches lessons. Children learn how to exist in formal spaces. They learn how to use silverware correctly, how to wait without complaint, how to accept food without rushing. These are not just table manners. They are social training. Christmas morning breakfast reinforces the idea that composure is as valuable as enthusiasm. Parents preside over the table with practiced ease. Their role is not to serve or manage logistics, but to observe, guide, and maintain tone. They ensure that the ritual remains intact, that breakfast does not blur into chaos, that the day begins exactly as it should. The presence of household staff, though subtle, is essential. They move in and out of the room almost invisibly, refilling cups, clearing plates, adjusting details before anyone needs to ask. Their work sustains the illusion that breakfast simply happens, that abundance appears naturally. This invisibility is part of the spectacle. For the family, breakfast feels effortless. For those supporting it, it is the result of coordination, preparation, and experience. Christmas morning breakfast works because many people know exactly what is expected of them, even if their names are never mentioned. What makes this ritual particularly revealing is how it delays gratification. In many households, children race past breakfast toward gifts. In these homes, breakfast comes first. Always. The anticipation is intentionally stretched. The holiday does not rush forward. It unfolds in layers. This delay reinforces a sense of control. Christmas is not something that overwhelms the household. It is something the household manages. Presents will wait. Excitement will wait. Breakfast must be completed properly before the next stage of the day begins. There is comfort in this order. The meal anchors the morning. It signals that everything is proceeding as planned, that nothing has gone wrong, that the house once again is functioning perfectly. Yet there is also something quietly theatrical about it. When food is prepared so carefully and eaten so calmly, it becomes symbolic rather than practical. Each bite feels less about taste and more about participation. You are not just eating breakfast, you are confirming your place in the ritual. Even indulgence is controlled. Rich foods are served, but portions remain elegant. Excess exists, but it is restrained by presentation and etiquette. The message is clear: we have more than enough, but we do not need to prove it loudly. This approach to food reflects a broader philosophy. In this world, true wealth does not shout. It signals. It does not rush. Wait. Breakfast on Christmas morning embodies that philosophy perfectly. The atmosphere at the table is calm, almost timeless. There is no clock watching. No pressure to finish quickly. Time bends around the meal. This, too, is luxury, the freedom to linger without consequence. As plates are cleared and cups emptied, there is a subtle shift in energy. Breakfast has done its job. It has set the tone. It has reminded everyone that the day will unfold smoothly, according to tradition. Only now is the household ready to move forward. The living room awaits. The tree stands ready. The next ritual approaches. But breakfast has already delivered its message. Christmas in this house is not about urgency or surprise. It is about continuity, structure, and the quiet reassurance that everything is exactly where it should be. In the next chapter, we will see how this same sense of ceremony transforms the moment everyone has been waiting for, gift giving, into something far more controlled, competitive, and revealing than simple joy. After breakfast has set the tone, calm, ordered, and carefully contained, the household finally moves toward the moment everyone has been anticipating. Yet even now, nothing happens quickly. In these homes, gift giving is not a spontaneous burst of excitement. It is a ritual shaped by expectation, restraint, and a deep awareness of being observed. Christmas presents are not simply opened. They are performed. The living room itself feels prepared for this moment. The tree stands tall and full, decorated not just for beauty but for balance. Ornaments are placed with intention. Lights glow evenly. Beneath the branches, gifts are arranged with a kind of visual logic, largest boxes positioned carefully, smaller ones layered around them, wrapping paper pristine and uncreased. Nothing appears accidental. Even abundance is organized. Before anyone touches a gift, there is a pause. Family members gather, finding their places as if instinctively. Children are reminded, gently but firmly, to wait. Parents exchange knowing glances. Cameras may appear. This moment matters not just for memory but for record. Christmas morning will be documented, preserved, and revisited. The performance must be done correctly. In these households, the act of opening a gift follows rules that are rarely spoken aloud, yet universally understood. Wrapping paper is not torn. It is carefully unfolded. Ribbons are untied rather than ripped. Boxes are opened slowly. This is not about conserving materials. It is about demonstrating control. Children learn quickly that enthusiasm must be measured. Too little excitement suggests ingratitude. Too much suggests a lack of familiarity with luxury. The ideal reaction sits somewhere in between, pleased, grateful, and composed. Smiles are encouraged. Gasps are optional. Screaming is discouraged. This balance is difficult, especially for the youngest members of the family. They feel excitement, but they are learning how to contain it. Christmas morning becomes one of their earliest lessons in emotional regulation. Joy is allowed, but only within acceptable limits. Gifts themselves often reflect careful planning. They are impressive, sometimes extravagant, but rarely surprising. Wishes have been discussed in advance. Preferences have been noted. The goal is not to astonish, but to satisfy expectations perfectly. Surprise is risky. Precision is safer. When a child opens a gift, the room responds. Applause may follow. Compliments are offered. Parents watch closely, gauging reactions. Is the response appropriate? Is gratitude expressed clearly enough? Has the performance landed as intended? This is not cruelty. It is conditioning. Gift giving in these households is as much about social learning as it is about generosity. Children are being taught how to receive, how to acknowledge wealth without appearing overwhelmed by it, how to show appreciation without revealing dependence. These skills will serve them later in boardrooms, social clubs, and formal gatherings where reactions matter. Adults, too, participate in this performance. When spouses exchange gifts, they do so with practiced ease. They feign surprise at items they selected themselves or approved weeks earlier. Their reactions are gentle, appreciative, and understated. Nothing disrupts the atmosphere. Extended family members follow similar patterns. Aunts and uncles present gifts that signal thoughtfulness and taste. Nothing feels out of place. Even humorous gifts are carefully chosen to remain within the boundaries of refinement. There is also competition here, though it is subtle. Who gave the most memorable gift? Whose wrapping is most elegant? Whose present receives the longest attention? These comparisons are rarely voiced, but they are noticed. For children, competition can be more direct. Siblings glance at one another's piles. They measure box sizes. They quietly calculate value even if they lack the language to describe it. Christmas morning becomes an early lesson in comparison. Yet, because everything is abundant, disappointment rarely lingers. If one gift falls short, another follows quickly. The sheer volume ensures that no single moment defines the experience. Abundance acts as a cushion, absorbing emotional highs and lows. What stands out is how controlled the chaos feels. Wrapping paper accumulates, but it does not scatter wildly. Boxes are stacked neatly. The room never truly descends into disorder. Someone often unseen will eventually restore balance. The sense of containment extends to gratitude itself. Thank you notes are expected later. Appreciation will be expressed again, formally, in writing. Christmas morning is just the first act in a longer ritual of acknowledgement. In this way, gift-giving becomes less about the object and more about the process. The order in which gifts are opened matters. The way they are handled matters. The reactions matter. Christmas becomes a choreography of exchange, each movement reinforcing the family's values. For children growing up in this environment, gifts lose their mystery early. They learn that objects arrive predictably. That desire is often fulfilled. that wanting something is rarely risky. Over time, the emotional weight of receiving shifts. The thrill softens. The novelty fades faster. Yet the ritual remains powerful. Years later, what many of these children remember most is not a specific toy or item, but the atmosphere, the light in the room, the way the tree looked, the quiet tension of waiting your turn, the feeling of being watched and of knowing how to behave. From the outside, this version of Christmas gift-giving may seem restrained, even cold. But from within, it feels normal. Say, structured. It removes uncertainty and replaces it with expectation. There is also something deeply reassuring about knowing that nothing will go wrong. No forgotten gifts. No mismatched surprises. No awkward moments of scarcity. Christmas morning unfolds exactly as planned year after year. And yet, this predictability carries its own cost. When everything is expected, wonder becomes harder to sustain. Surprise loses its edge. Gratitude becomes procedural. Joy becomes quieter. This is not to say that happiness is absent. It is present but softened, polished, wrapped as carefully as the gifts themselves. As the final presents are opened and the room settles into a gentle hum of satisfaction, there is a collective sense of completion. The ritual has been successfully performed. Everyone has played their part. The family moves forward intact and composed. Christmas morning in this world is not about losing yourself in joy. It is about confirming stability, about demonstrating continuity, about showing through careful behavior that you belong here and understand the rules. The gifts will eventually be moved aside. New toys will be tried. Conversations will shift. But the performance has already done its work. In the next chapter, we will step behind the scenes into the hidden spaces where this perfection is prepared. Because in these homes, even the act of wrapping a gift is elevated into an art form, complete with its own rules, rivalries, and quiet dramas. If the living room is the stage and gift-giving is the performance, then the gift-wrapping room is where everything truly begins. This is the space no guest is meant to see. The quiet workshop where Christmas is engineered long before the family ever gathers around the tree. In wealthy 1950s households, wrapping gifts is not a casual task done at the kitchen table with tape borrowed from a drawer. It is a dedicated operation, housed in its own room, governed by its own rules, and treated with a seriousness that borders on reverence. The very existence of a gift wrapping room says something important. It suggests that Christmas abundance is not accidental. It is planned, stored, protected, perfected. This room exists because there are too many gifts, too much paper, too many ribbons, and too much expectation to handle casually. Order is required. The room itself is often kept cool, deliberately so. Paper must remain crisp. Ribbon must not curl or soften. Tape must adhere cleanly. Every detail is controlled. Shelves line the walls, filled with rolls of wrapping paper in patterns carefully chosen for different recipients and occasions. There is paper for children, paper for adults, paper for formal gifts, and paper reserved only for the most important exchanges. Nothing is random. Nothing is interchangeable. In the center of the room sits a large table, polished smooth, wide enough to accommodate oversized boxes and long fabric-like lengths of paper. Scissors, often more than one pair, are kept sharp and pristine. Ribbon spools are arranged by color, width, and finish. Gift tags, never store-bought, wait in neat stacks ready for handwritten names. This room is not chaotic. It is calm, quiet, purposeful. Wrapping here is not rushed. It is methodical. Every fold is measured. Every edge is aligned. Corners are tucked with geometric precision. A poorly wrapped gift is not just a mistake. It is a failure of care. In many families, this room becomes a subtle arena of competition. Siblings negotiate over paper choices. Parents enforce hierarchy. Certain papers are off limits, reserved for specific people. Using the wrong ribbon for the wrong gift is quietly corrected. These rules are rarely written down, but everyone knows them. Children who are allowed into this space learn quickly that wrapping is not just decoration. It is communication. The wrapping tells the recipient how much thought went into the gift, how important they are, and how seriously the giver takes the exchange. A perfectly wrapped box signals respect. Carelessness sends the wrong message. There are family legends attached to this room. Stories told in half-joking tones about past Christmases when someone used too much of the good paper or creased a ribbon beyond repair. These stories are warnings disguised as humor. They teach restraint, attention, and awareness. Adults often hover here, offering advice whether it is needed or not. Suggestions about bow technique. Gentle corrections about alignment. Comments that sound helpful but carry judgment underneath. Wrapping becomes another opportunity to demonstrate taste, patience, and competence. And then there is the presence of household staff. Their role in this room is essential, though often unspoken. They prepare materials, maintain order, and sometimes complete the wrapping themselves, especially for gifts meant to look flawless. Their hands know the techniques instinctively. Their work ensures that when gifts appear under the tree, they look effortless. Yet their contribution remains invisible. The family experiences the result, not the process. The wrapping room absorbs labor the way the rest of the house absorbs noise, quietly, efficiently, without acknowledgement. What makes this space so revealing is how seriously it treats appearance. The gift inside matters, of course, but the exterior must match its value. Wrapping becomes a promise, a signal that what lies beneath is worthy of attention. This attention to presentation mirrors the broader values of the household. Life, like gifts, should look orderly. Excess should be beautiful. Effort should be hidden. The wrapping room is not just about Christmas. It is about worldview. There is also a sense of anticipation embedded here. Boxes are stacked, labeled, and stored, waiting for the right moment. The gifts exist before the holiday does. Christmas morning is simply the unveiling of something already complete. This changes how surprise functions. When gifts are prepared so far in advance, surprise becomes controlled. Nothing is impulsive. Nothing is last minute. Everything has been considered, approved, and placed exactly where it belongs. For children, sneaking into this room is tempting. It feels forbidden, charged with possibility. A glimpse of stacked boxes can spark imagination, speculation, and secret alliances between siblings. The wrapping room becomes a place of mystery not because it is chaotic, but because it is closed. Parents understand this power and guard the space carefully. Doors are kept shut. Access is limited. The illusion must be preserved. Christmas magic depends not on spontaneity but on concealment. When the wrapping is complete, the room returns to stillness. Scissors are cleaned. Paper ends are trimmed. Supplies are restored to order. The room waits, silent, until next year. This meticulous process ensures that by the time gifts reach the living room, they look perfect. No wrinkles. No mismatched colors. No visible tape. The performance is seamless. From the outside, this level of care may seem excessive. But within these households, it feels logical. When everything else in life is structured, Christmas must be as well. Disorder would feel out of place. The gift wrapping room represents a hidden truth about wealth. Abundance requires management. Without structure, excess becomes messy. This room exists to prevent that mess from ever appearing. And so, while Christmas morning appears calm and effortless, it is supported by hours of unseen preparation. The wrapping room holds that effort quietly, allowing the rest of the house to remain smooth, bright, and composed. As we step away from this hidden space and return to the visible parts of the holiday, one thing becomes clear. Christmas in these homes is not defined by chaos or surprise. It is defined by control, planning, and presentation. In the next chapter, we move back into the public view where neighbors, guests, and the outside world enter the picture. Because Christmas for the wealthy is not only about family. It is also about being seen, remembered, and quietly measured against everyone else. Once the gifts are wrapped, the breakfast consumed, and the morning rituals completed, Christmas in these households expands beyond the family itself. The holiday begins to reach outward, into neighborhoods, social circles, and carefully maintained hierarchies. Because for the wealthy families of 1950s America, Christmas is never only private. It is also public. And in that public dimension, status is quietly negotiated through ritual. These rituals do not announce themselves loudly. There are no speeches, no declarations, no overt displays of dominance. Instead, status moves through subtleties. Who sends a card, how it looks, where it is displayed, who visits, who is invited, and who is merely acknowledged. Christmas becomes a social language, and every detail is a word in a long, carefully written sentence. One of the clearest expressions of this is the Christmas card. In these homes, cards arrive in abundance, stacking up on tables, mantels, and sideboards. Thick envelopes, cream-colored paper, gold embossing, carefully posed family photographs. Each card represents a connection, a relationship, a place within a social network. And each one is noticed. Cards are not treated equally. Some are placed front and center, positioned where they will be seen immediately by guests. Others are moved slightly aside. A few are relocated quietly to less prominent surfaces. This is not cruelty. It is curation. The arrangement reflects importance, closeness, and influence. Children notice this even if they are never explicitly told. They learn which names carry weight, which families matter, which cards receive comments and which pass without remark. Christmas becomes an early lesson in social mapping. Parents, especially mothers in this era, take these rituals seriously. The arrival of cards is tracked. Who sent one? Who did not? Who included a handwritten note? Who reused last year's design? Each detail becomes a data point. None of this is openly discussed, yet it shapes decisions throughout the year. Outgoing cards are handled with equal care. Messages are polite, warm, and deliberately vague. Nothing too personal. Nothing too revealing. Just enough to maintain connection without inviting intimacy. Names are written carefully. Addresses double-checked. Mistakes avoided. A poorly addressed card sends the wrong signal. This exchange creates a quiet competition. Not a race but a comparison. Who has the most cards? Who has the most impressive ones? Who seems most connected? Christmas becomes a snapshot of social reach. Beyond cards, there are visits. Some neighbors stop by briefly, welcomed with warmth and efficiency. Drinks are offered. Compliments exchanged. Conversations remain light. These visits are pleasant but controlled. Others are more formal, scheduled in advance, marked by expectation. The house prepares itself accordingly. Who comes inside matters. Who stays in the doorway matters. Who is invited later for dinner or drinks matters most of all. Children absorb these distinctions instinctively. They watch how adults behave differently with different guests. The tone of voice, the length of the visit, the ease or formality of conversation. Christmas teaches them that relationships are layered and that access is earned. Even decoration participates in this signaling. The exterior of the house is carefully managed. Lights are elegant, balanced, tasteful. Not too modest, not too loud. The goal is admiration, not commentary. Neighbors notice. Comparisons are made. A sense of quiet rivalry emerges even if no one admits it. Inside, decorations follow similar rules. Trees are tall and symmetrical. Ornaments coordinated. Nothing clashes. Nothing looks improvised. The house communicates stability, taste, and continuity. It says this family knows who they are. Photographs taken during the holiday serve a similar purpose. Family portraits are staged, polished, and preserved. These images will be mailed, framed, and displayed. They become artifacts of identity, proof of unity, proof of success. Children are coached carefully for these moments. Where to stand, how to smile, how to hold themselves. These instructions may feel minor, but they carry weight. A photograph lasts longer than a moment. It will represent the family long after Christmas has passed. What is striking about these rituals is how much effort is invested in appearing effortless. Nothing should look forced. Nothing should look strained. Wealth, in this world, expresses itself best when it seems natural. Christmas provides the perfect stage for this illusion. Everything feels generous, warm, and inviting, yet boundaries remain intact. Visitors are welcomed but not too deeply. Connections are maintained but not examined too closely. The holiday becomes a balancing act between openness and control. There is comfort in this predictability. Everyone knows what is expected. Everyone knows their role. Christmas reinforces the existing social order rather than challenging it. It rewards familiarity and continuity. Yet beneath this smooth surface lies a constant awareness of being observed. These families understand that Christmas is a moment when others are watching. Neighbors notice decorations. Friends compare cards. Relatives remember gifts. The holiday becomes a test not of generosity, but of consistency. To falter would be noticeable. To deviate would invite comment. Christmas, then, becomes a time not just to celebrate but to maintain reputation. For children raised in this environment, social awareness becomes second nature. They learn to read rooms, to notice shifts in tone, to understand that every interaction carries meaning. Christmas is their classroom. And still, within all the structure, there is genuine warmth. Laughter happens. Conversations linger. Familiar faces bring comfort. The rituals may be formal, but they are not empty. They create a sense of belonging within a defined world. The problem is not that these rituals exist. It is that they leave little room for surprise. Everything is accounted for. Everyone is placed. The holiday unfolds along expected lines. As evening approaches and the social rituals begin to wind down, the house feels full not just of people and decoration, but of signals sent and received. The holiday has done its work. Status has been affirmed. Connections reinforced. Appearances maintained. And now, with the public side of Christmas carefully managed, the family turns inward once again toward entertainment, indulgence, and traditions that exist just for them. In the next chapter, we will return to the children, the toys, and the pleasures of excess. Because in these households, Christmas is not complete without abundance so great it almost overwhelms itself and yet, somehow, never quite does. As the social rituals quiet down and the house settles back into itself, Christmas shifts once again, this time toward indulgence. The formal moments are complete. The cards have been noticed. The visits have ended. Now, the focus turns to abundance in its most visible form: toys, entertainment, and the promise of endless amusement. In wealthy 1950s households, this phase of Christmas is not chaotic, but it is expansive. It reveals what happens when desire is rarely limited by cost or availability. The living room begins to transform. Wrapping paper has been cleared away, boxes stacked neatly to the side, and new objects slowly take over the space. Trains circle the tree on polished tracks. Dollhouses open to reveal tiny, perfectly furnished rooms. Mechanical toys whir softly. Everything is new, pristine, and impressive. What stands out immediately is scale. There are not just one or two gifts meant to occupy the day, but many, sometimes more than a child can meaningfully absorb. Toys arrive in waves, each one carefully chosen, each one meant to delight. But when delight is constant, it changes shape. Excitement becomes flatter, less intense, spread thin across abundance. Children move from toy to toy, testing, inspecting, briefly playing before drifting to the next. There is curiosity but little urgency. No single object carries the weight of the day. If something fails to impress, it can be quietly set aside. Another will take its place. This is where Christmas in these homes begins to resemble something modern, an early version of unboxing culture. The joy comes not just from possession, but from the act of opening, revealing, and displaying. Each toy is examined, admired, and then added to the growing landscape of abundance. For adults, this scene is reassuring. It confirms that expectations have been met, that generosity has been expressed fully, that nothing feels lacking. Parents watch from a distance, satisfied not by the children's intense excitement, but by the absence of disappointment. Technology plays an especially important role here. Radios, record players, and eventually televisions become the centerpiece of Christmas indulgence. A new appliance is not just a gift, it is a symbol of progress, modernity, and forward movement. Owning the latest device confirms that the family is not only wealthy but current. When a television appears, the room changes. Attention shifts. Chairs are repositioned. The household gathers. The screen glows softly, offering cartoons, holiday specials, or films. This shared focus creates a new kind of togetherness, quieter, more passive, but deeply absorbing. For children, these devices are mesmerizing. They represent access to a wider world without leaving the house. For parents, they represent convenience. Entertainment that requires no supervision, no setup, no cleanup. Christmas becomes smoother, easier, more contained. Toys themselves reflect the values of the era. They are sturdy, well-made, and often educational in appearance. Chemistry sets, building kits, trains that teach precision and patience, dolls that mirror idealized domestic life. Even play carries a sense of preparation for adulthood, for responsibility, for maintaining order. This does not mean play lacks imagination. It simply means imagination is guided, structured, encouraged within certain boundaries. The toys invite creativity, but they also reinforce norms. Children learn not only how to play but what kinds of futures are considered appropriate. There is also comparison here, as always. Siblings glance at each other's toys. Cousins quietly assess who received what. Value is estimated even if never spoken aloud. Christmas becomes another lesson in hierarchy, softened by abundance. Yet because there is so much, competition rarely turns sharp. No one is left empty-handed. No one feels truly overlooked. Excess smooths over inequality within the family, even as it highlights the family's difference from the outside world. The day stretches on without pressure. There is no rush to leave the house, no schedule to follow. Time bends again, shaped by entertainment. Toys fill hours. Television fills silence. The holiday becomes leisurely, almost suspended. For adults, this phase offers rest. After the planning, the hosting, and the rituals, they retreat slightly. They watch children play. They converse quietly. They enjoy the sight of a house functioning exactly as intended. The systems work. The gifts please. The day unfolds without friction. And yet, something subtle is happening beneath the surface. When entertainment is limitless, attention becomes fleeting. Children move quickly from one interest to another. Satisfaction comes easily, but fades just as easily. The memory of the day becomes a blur of objects rather than a single cherished moment. Years later, many of these children will struggle to remember which toy mattered most. What remains instead is a feeling, a sense of fullness, comfort, and safety. Christmas felt complete. Nothing was missing. This is perhaps the defining feature of this kind of holiday. It removes sharp edges. It eliminates longing. Desire is fulfilled before it can grow intense. The result is a calm happiness rather than a dramatic one. From the outside, this abundance can look overwhelming, even excessive. But inside the house, it feels controlled. Toys are stored neatly. New possessions find their place quickly. Order returns. As afternoon light shifts and energy begins to soften, the toys remain scattered, not chaotically, but as evidence of a day well supplied. Entertainment has done its job. It has filled time, distracted minds, and reinforced the idea that comfort is endless. Soon, attention will turn again. Toward evening traditions. Toward dinner. Toward moments that require a different kind of participation. But for now, the house rests in the glow of excess, quietly satisfied, gently full, and completely certain that Christmas has delivered exactly what was expected. In the next chapter, we will encounter some of the holiday's most curious moments, traditions so unnecessary, so extravagant, that they reveal something deeper about wealth and boredom. Because when everything is available, even celebration begins to search for novelty. When abundance becomes normal, celebration must work harder to feel special. In the wealthiest households of 1950s America, Christmas traditions did not just emerge from faith or family history, they evolved out of comfort, repetition, and a quiet fear of sameness. Once food, gifts, and entertainment were guaranteed, families invented rituals not out of necessity, but out of boredom. These traditions often made little practical sense. In fact, their uselessness was part of the appeal. Cold weather pool plunges are a perfect example. Jumping into freezing water on Christmas morning served no purpose other than proving you could afford to do something so uncomfortable purely for tradition's sake. It was a ritual of endurance wrapped in humor, proof that the family had reached a level of security where discomfort could be voluntarily chosen, documented, laughed about, and repeated every year. The same logic applied to elaborate dressing rituals. Matching pajamas, monogrammed robes, color-coordinated slippers. These were not about warmth or modesty. They were about participation, belonging, being visibly part of a unit that could afford to turn even sleepwear into a status symbol. Everyone knew the rules. You dressed properly, even for breakfast. You appeared polished even before coffee. Christmas morning was staged from the moment you woke up. Not for strangers, but for the family itself. Ritual replaced spontaneity. Another curious tradition was the use of technology as ceremony. The household intercom was not just functional, it became theatrical. Announcements echoed through marble halls. Summons replaced shouting. Even communication was elevated, formalized, and slightly absurd. Calling family members to breakfast over an intercom was not faster than walking down the hallway. It simply felt more important. It turned a normal moment into an event. In houses where nothing needed to be efficient, everything could be dramatic. Gift wrapping itself became a ritual performance. Entire rooms dedicated to paper, ribbon, scissors, and bows. Temperature-controlled spaces to protect materials. Rules about which paper could be used and when. Arguments over ribbon choices. Stories passed down about past wrapping disasters. The gift was no longer the point. The presentation was. In these rooms, families competed quietly. Not openly, but through precision. Clean edges. Perfect folds. Calligraphy tags. Wrapping became a test of discipline and taste. A poorly wrapped gift was not just sloppy, it was a social failure. Then there were the traditions that existed purely to fill time. Extended family photos. Endless retakes. Matching sweaters imported from overseas. Everyone arranged by height, age, or importance. The process was uncomfortable, slow, and mildly irritating, which is exactly why it endured. Suffering together, even in small ways, reinforced unity. The resulting photograph rarely captured joy. Instead, it preserved effort. Proof that everyone showed up. That no one escaped the ritual. Years later, these photos became artifacts not of happiness, but of participation. Another hallmark of excess-driven tradition was competitive generosity. Charity balls, donation drives, and public giving were sincere in part but also performative. Wealthy families did not just donate. They donated visibly. Pledges were announced. Applause followed. Names were remembered. The act of giving became a social ranking system, where generosity and prestige overlapped. Christmas charity became less about need and more about recognition. Even neighborhood activities followed this logic. Caroling was not just about spreading cheer, it was a parade. Fur coats, lanterns, coordinated songbooks. Families moved together through the streets, singing loudly enough to be noticed, politely enough to remain respectable. The cold did not matter. The voices did not matter. What mattered was presence. Inside the house, boredom quietly shaped new customs. Board games stretched late into the night not because they were fun but because they created tension. Monopoly, in particular, became a tradition precisely because it caused arguments. In homes where conflict was usually subtle and controlled, a game allowed emotions to surface safely. Accusations, alliances, betrayals, then laughter. Monopoly was not about winning, it was about releasing pressure. Children, sensing the loosened structure of the holiday, invented their own rituals. Late-night rebellions, forbidden snacks, raids on adult-only rooms. These moments mattered deeply even if adults dismissed them as chaos. In a household built on order, rebellion became its own form of tradition. Adults, meanwhile, retreated into rituals of nostalgia. Cigars by the fire, brandy in heavy glasses. Stories repeated every year with slight variations. Tales of past hardship, spoken gently, almost ceremonially. These stories served a purpose. They reminded everyone that wealth was not guaranteed forever. That someone, somewhere in the family line, had once lived differently. Hardship became a story, not a threat. Perhaps the strangest traditions were the ones no one questioned anymore. Lighting displays so large they strained the local power grid. Decorations visible from far beyond the property line. The competition with neighbors never spoken, always understood. No one remembered who started it. But every year the lights grew brighter. These rituals did not exist because they were meaningful in themselves. They existed because meaning needed to be manufactured. When survival is assured, celebration becomes performance. When comfort is constant, novelty becomes the goal. And so Christmas in these homes grew elaborate, even surreal. Traditions piled atop traditions, not to deepen joy but to prevent emptiness, to ensure the day felt full. Yet beneath the absurdity, something human remained. These rituals created shared memories. Even ridiculous ones lasted longer than perfect gifts. Long after toys were forgotten, people remembered the freezing pool, the argument over wrapping paper, the night Monopoly fell apart. Excess did not erase emotion, it redirected it. In the next section, we will turn our attention to a quieter contrast, the invisible people who made all of this possible. Because behind every polished ritual stood an army of staff, moving silently, ensuring that Christmas appeared effortless while experiencing it very differently. For every moment of effortless luxury enjoyed by the wealthy during Christmas in 1950s America, there was an entire world operating just out of sight. While family members drifted from breakfast to presents to parties, another group carried the real weight of the holiday. The staff. Maids, cooks, butlers, chauffeurs, gardeners, nannies each played a role so essential that the celebration could not exist without them, yet their presence was carefully managed to remain unobtrusive. The greatest success of a rich family's Christmas was not abundance. It was smoothness. And smoothness required invisible labor. From before dawn, the house was already awake. While the family slept beneath layers of imported linens, staff members moved through hallways with practiced silence. Fires were lit. Kitchens came alive. Coffee was prepared to exact preferences learned over years. Breakfast tables were set with precision, each place arranged according to hierarchy, habit, and expectation. By the time the family emerged, the illusion was complete. Christmas appeared to unfold naturally, as if by magic. The structure of household labor in the 1950s followed strict, almost ceremonial rules. Everyone knew their place. The butler stood at the top, often serving the same family for decades, becoming a living archive of traditions, scandals, and unspoken rules. Beneath him came the housekeeper, then cooks, maids, and ground staff, each role clearly defined and rarely crossed. This hierarchy mattered most during Christmas. The holiday brought extra work, not rest. More meals, more guests, more expectations. Decorations had to be perfect. Timing had to be flawless. Any mistake, cold food, missing ornament, Late arrival would disrupt the carefully constructed atmosphere of abundance. And yet, staff were trained never to rush. Efficiency had to look calm. Stress had to remain private. One of the few moments when staff became visible was during the annual Christmas envelope ceremony. This was not generosity in the modern sense, it was obligation, wrapped in ritual. Bonuses were handed out formally, often in silence, accompanied by polite words that changed little from year to year. The envelopes mattered. They were practical, sometimes desperately so. But the ceremony itself reinforced hierarchy. Gratitude flowed downward. Acknowledgement upward was restrained. Staff thanked the family. Rarely the reverse. Small gifts followed cookies, gloves, aprons, sometimes a book or a bottle. These gestures were meant to signal care, but they also reinforced distance. The relationship was personal but never equal. For many staff members, this ceremony was the closest thing to a holiday celebration they would receive. Afterward, they returned quietly to work, ensuring the family's Christmas continued uninterrupted. In the kitchens and service halls, however, a different Christmas existed. Here, laughter was looser. Jokes were shared. Leftover pastries were eaten quickly, standing up between tasks. Someone might hum a carol. Someone else might sneak an extra slice of cake. These moments were brief, fragile, and precious. They were not scheduled. Unlike the family's rituals, staff traditions were informal and improvised. A shared pot of tea. A whispered story. A moment of rest before the next wave of demands. Christmas spirit existed here, too, but stripped of performance. The contrast was stark. While the family debated ribbon choices or argued over monopoly, staff focused on logistics. Plates needed clearing. Fires needed tending. Guests needed coats retrieved. Every emotional high upstairs translated into extra work downstairs. Even the most extravagant traditions, the charity balls, the caroling, the midnight snacks, created ripples of labor. Someone pressed the coats. Someone packed the car. Someone stayed behind to clean up the aftermath. And yet, professionalism required emotional neutrality. Staff were expected to observe everything and comment on nothing. Family arguments, quiet breakdowns, awkward silences, all were witnessed, remembered, and never acknowledged. In many ways, staff knew the family better than the family knew itself. They saw patterns repeat year after year. The same jokes, the same tensions, the same disappointments masked by excess. They knew which gifts would cause jealousy, which relatives would drink too much, which traditions were loved and which were endured. But this knowledge stayed locked behind polite smiles. Christmas also highlighted the limits of wealth. No amount of money eliminated dependence on other people. In fact, wealth increased it. The more elaborate the celebration, the more fragile it became. One missing staff member could disrupt everything. This dependence created an unspoken tension. Families wanted staff to feel loyal, even grateful. Staff wanted stability, respect, and fair compensation. Both sides performed their roles carefully, especially during the holidays. For children growing up in these households, staff often provided emotional grounding. Nannies and housekeepers were the ones who listened, comforted, and explained. They were present during tantrums, late-night fears, and quiet moments when the performance dropped. Christmas amplified this bond. Amid the noise and spectacle, staff often offered calm. Yet the line was never crossed. Affection existed, but authority remained. When the holiday ended, hierarchy reasserted itself fully. In public memory, Christmas at the top is remembered through glittering images, trees, gifts, lights, parties. But beneath every polished surface was a network of people whose labor made joy look effortless. They were not part of the story told in family albums. They rarely appeared in photographs. Their names were sometimes forgotten. But without them, there would have been no Christmas as imagined. In the final section, we will step back from the mansion entirely and look inward, examining what all this excess, ritual, and performance ultimately reveals. Not just about wealth, but about human longing, memory, and the quiet truth hidden beneath a perfect holiday. When the lights dim, the guests leave, and the last plate is cleared away, Christmas in these grand 1950s households finally becomes quiet. The mansion settles. Hallways echo softly. Somewhere a clock ticks. And in that stillness, the true meaning of all this excess quietly reveals itself. Because beneath the monograms, rituals, and spectacle, Christmas for the ultra-wealthy was never just about money. It was about reassurance. In a world shaped by postwar anxiety, nuclear fear, social change, and rapid modernization, wealth offered protection but not certainty. These families lived comfortably, yet they were deeply invested in maintaining that comfort. Christmas became a ritualized proof that everything was still working as it should. The house was full. The table was abundant. The traditions were intact. Nothing had broken. Every repeated ritual, from the same breakfast dishes to the same arguments over board games, was a way of anchoring time. When life outside felt unpredictable, repetition created safety. If Christmas looked the same every year, then perhaps the future could be trusted too. Excess in this sense was not random. It was deliberate. Too much food meant no one would go hungry. Too many gifts meant no one would feel forgotten. Too many lights meant darkness stayed outside. The spectacle was not just for show, it was a shield. Yet, paradoxically, the more elaborate Christmas became, the more fragile it also was. The entire illusion depended on everything going smoothly. A missed tradition. A broken ornament. A public argument. Any crack threatened the sense of control. That is why rituals mattered so much. They created structure where emotion might otherwise spill out. They gave people roles to play when genuine feeling was complicated. Gratitude could be performed even when envy existed. Joy could be staged even when boredom crept in. Christmas allowed people to feel, without having to explain themselves. Children sensed this instinctively. Long after they forgot specific gifts, they remembered the atmosphere. The smell of pine. The glow of lights. The strange mix of excitement and exhaustion. The feeling of being part of something large and unstoppable. Adults, meanwhile, carried a quieter awareness. They understood that this comfort was inherited, not guaranteed. That they were custodians of a legacy built by previous generations. Christmas, then, became a yearly reaffirmation of identity. We are still here. We are still together. We still belong to this story. Even nostalgia played a role. Stories about harder times, rationing, modest holidays, simpler trees were told not to glorify struggle, but to justify abundance. If the past was difficult, the present must be enjoyed fully. Excess became a reward for survival, even if survival was no longer at stake. And yet, despite all the money, these families wrestled with the same emotions as everyone else. Sibling rivalry. Generational tension. The fear of disappointing parents. The quiet pressure to live up to expectations. Christmas did not erase these things. It simply wrapped them in velvet. In many ways, the most honest moments came late at night. When the house finally emptied of noise. When adults sat quietly by the fire. When children lay awake, full of sugar and thoughts, staring at shadows on the ceiling. That is when reflection happened. Was this happiness? Was this enough? Would next year feel the same? The story does not answer those questions. And that is the point. Because Christmas, at its core, is not a solution, it is a pause. A moment suspended between past and future. A ritualized permission to stop striving, even briefly. For the filthy rich of 1950s America, Christmas was not proof that they had everything. It was proof that they needed meaning just as much as anyone else. Different setting. Same longing. And maybe that is the quiet truth beneath all the silk pajamas, silver trays, and glowing trees. No matter how polished the celebration, Christmas is still about holding on to warmth, memory, connection, and the hope that, for one night at least, everything feels safe. And with that thought, the lights fade, the house sleeps, and another carefully preserved Christmas slips into memory ready to be repeated, almost exactly the same next year. And so, as the last lights dim and the mansion finally exhales, we step gently out of this velvet-wrapped world. We have wandered through monogrammed mornings, endless feasts, absurd traditions, and rituals built not just from wealth, but from habit, memory, and the human need for reassurance. Christmas for the ultra-rich of 1950s America was not simply about excess. It was about control in an uncertain world, about turning comfort into ceremony, and about using tradition to convince themselves that everything family, fortune, and future was still firmly in place. Beneath the polished silver and perfectly wrapped gifts, they felt the same things we all do: nostalgia, rivalry, tenderness, and the quiet hope that the people around them would still be there next year. And that is where this story gently meets our own lives. Because whether Christmas is loud or simple, extravagant or improvised, what lingers is not the price tag. It is the moments, the strange traditions, the shared laughter, the familiar chaos we somehow come to love. So wherever you are tonight, under a heavy blanket, beside a glowing screen, or drifting slowly towards sleep, thank you for spending this time with me. If this story brought you a little calm, a little curiosity, or simply helped the world feel softer for a while, then it has done exactly what it was meant to do. Take a deep breath. Let the noise fade. And rest easy. Good night, and I will see you in the next quiet story. Crescent Moon.